Okay, brilliant. All right, so I'm just going to say a few words to open then. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Barry Cranford. I'm the founder of the London Java community. So I'm not a Java developer myself. I run a tech recruitment company called rxjs. Here at rxjs, we have been on a mission for the last 12 years to prove that recruitment can be a force for good in the tech industry beyond just getting people jobs. And that's specifically around learning, career development, mentoring, and that kind of thing. So we aim to create groups and platforms where we can connect people that want to learn with others that want to share, either on a group basis, like the LJC, or the events, or London CTOs, that kind of thing. And also on a one-to-one level through introducing mentors and mentees through our Meet Mentor community. Most recently, we've been playing with this new concept around bringing people together in small learning groups. So one of these groups is called the Aspiring Speakers Group, and that's exactly what this event is meant to be a part of. So we're bringing people together that are looking to improve their speaking skills. Some people have aspirations to get to a conference or keynote or subject matter expert level. Others are speaking internally and just looking to improve themselves. So all are welcome within this group. So if it's something for you, then please do join. So the idea of today, this event, is to give them a safe place to practice and get feedback, ultimately while entertaining you. And in fact, a few words on feedback before we move over to Chris for the first talk. We will send a link out afterwards, which will have some multiple choice questions and just a chance for you to say what you thought about the event, what you thought about the talk, sorry. Feedback is absolutely crucial at this point, certainly with new speakers. So any feedback that you've got, anything that you particularly liked gives huge amounts of confidence. Anything that you thought there was areas of development can help with those specifics. But yeah, please do feel free to use a form. Anyway, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chris Popov for the first talk. So the talk is going to be a first look into the .NET Core from an ex-Java developer. So Chris has been using Java since 2000 and has been working as a Java developer in different industries in France and the UK, and he's transitioned into startups as a co-founder or a CTO. So Chris, take it away.
Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to meet you. I've got a short presentation as well, so let me share my screen. Let me see how that works. Can everybody see it? Okay, present. Yeah, thanks for introducing me, Barry. And I decided to because this is a Java community group, I decided to talk about .NET. Joke aside, is really I've been working with Java since 2000, and I never really had the time to really look at .NET, what it is about, and I am one of those who are anti-Microsoft people. But there's some interesting new developments happening there, and also now as a sort of CTO, I try to be more technology agnostic. So I really want to see what's out there on the other side, and I discovered some very interesting facts. So let me share that with you. Apologies if any of you really know about .NET, because I'm absolute beginner. So maybe I'm just sharing what I learned by investigating .NET space. So a bit of history. I think when Microsoft was developing the .NET framework, they had to develop their core libraries, and they started developing some language called Cool, but for some reason they had some copyright issues, and they named it C#, as an extension of C++, by a guy called Anders Haus. I can't see his name because of that thing. Yeah, Anders Heisberg. He's not the creator of Pascal, but he's a creator of Turbo Pascal, and lately he's also famous for TypeScript, if I'm not wrong. And really, C# and .NET framework are very related. every time we talk about .NET, we talk about C#. And C# as a language has undergone many, many evolutions, and originally was inspired by Java and C++, but later on they've introduced many innovations such as generics, such as attributes, and these innovations also made it into Java, for example. Some of those innovations made it into JavaScript, if I'm not wrong. So for example, async code recently. What's interesting is that somewhere about 2016, they created a new project called .NET Core, which is open source, cross-platform. I'm like, is this really Microsoft? What's going on? And it was not a full rewrite of the .NET framework. So now .NET framework really is running on Windows, was really coupled with Windows. And they experimented with .NET Core, and as time progressed, now 2019, with .NET Core 3.0, they have rewritten pretty much all the APIs, all the libraries that are required, that are going to be maintained going forward. Everything that's kind of going to be discontinued, they didn't bother rewriting. And I can say that now is the way going forward. I think from what I've read, it's more or less like the JVM ecosystem. There is an environment that's cross-platform, and it's open source as well. Oops, how do you switch? Apologies. Yeah, classical hello world. So I just wanted to write some code and run it. I found it very, very easy to install .NET on Mac, sorry, .NET Core, because this is the new thing. On a command line, I just typed .NET new console, and that created a new project. And then I typed .NET run, and that executes the hello world that's actually automatically generated for you. Now, I tried to use IDE. So I didn't install Visual, how do you call this? Visual Studio, which is the main IDE for Microsoft. There's another one called VS Code, which is a very nice code editor for multiple languages. And for some reason, it just couldn't run it there out of the box. It just failed. So I had no time to investigate. So that was a failure. I mean, I can show a little bit. That's VS Code. So this is the source code that's been generated. And it failed, but I was able to run that on a command line. I typed .NET run, and hello world. So if we come back to my presentation, so if you talk about C#, it's a general purpose multi-paradigm programming language, and it has many, many paradigms. It's like strongly typed, imperative, but also functional, and so on. And there are many fans. So this is an example of a fan blog. I don't know if I can comment on every attribute here. It's like awesome, it's fast, it's amazing. So if you read about different articles, they say how amazing this is. A quick syntax overview is very similar to really C++ and Java, same type of languages. It's an example of classes. So there are some elements of C++. For example, you have to declare a method virtual if you want to make it inheritable. Some other nice features that every modern language now has, for example, string interpolation, lambdas, so functional programming. Something that they seem to be very proud of is their link or query expressions. So you can query in SQL type, like in SQL type of language, any data source. It could be enumerable, so it could be any collection or any list of data. It doesn't have to be a database. It could be XML file, it could be CSV. And that apparently is very, very powerful, and you can I know how hard it is to browse and find things in Java. Sorry, it's a bit slow. This is a quick overview of the .NET runtime. So it's really similar to the JVM. We've got multiple languages as input. They've got compilers. They compile into intermediary kind of bytecode. They call it MISCL. And then the runtime environment CLR is like the JVM, and then you have native code at the end. So I would say as a conclusion, I think Microsoft are moving in the right direction, and they've removed the biggest obstacle for adoption, in my opinion, of .NET, because now it's really, they've joined the open source ecosystem, and you have the choice between Java, JVM-based languages. You can use .NET Core. It runs on Linux. It runs on any environment. And if I quote this guy, Scott Hunter, everything they'll be building in the future will be based on .NET Core. So I think they're discontinuing their legacy .NET framework. So yeah, I mean, I love Java, but now C# and .NET seem to be doing right. So will Kotlin going to save Java? I don't know. And it also feels like there is a new strategy for all the different technology giants like Amazon, Google, there's a typo there, Microsoft. They provide hosted services. So there's more and more cloud services, and all the tools and frameworks are open source. But if you want to execute them on the cloud environment, then you pay per use. You pay for what you use only. So everything mainstream now seems to be open source, and I'll say open source has won. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Chris. Appreciate that. Did anyone have any questions quickly for Chris on the top? No questions? I think you got away with that one then.
I just found the unmute button.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, is that Steve out there?
Yeah, Steve. Yeah. So what's your thought? Are you going to become a .NET programmer now? Are you going to shift over?
No. No, the thing is, I was missing out on so many jobs because whenever I see .NET, no, I'm not even talking to these guys. Yeah. And now it's like, and other things I didn't mention in the presentation is that they seem to be, Docker is a first-class citizen now. So everything you build on .NET Core is kind of Dockerizable very easy. They have some nice feature where the host doesn't need to have .NET deployed. It can ship as an executable. So it can be either Golang or, any language really. You don't need to think about what's the implementation. And if you're building microservices, as far as I'm concerned on a high level, I'm quite happy to work with teams that are experts in .NET, and if they say that's what we want to use, fine. Now, if I have to contribute, build something from scratch, there is a bit of a learning curve. So I'll be wasting time really trying to get up to speed to use .NET. So that's the other thing, I know Java, I know some other languages, so I'll just use them because I know them. But let's say I don't have any strong arguments anymore against .NET.
Okay, all right, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Okay, so we're going to move on next to Carly. Dom's just posted a feedback form there. So we're trying a new feedback form this time, which is more multiple choice to try and just help it get a feedback out of your head quicker and easier and encourage more. So please do click on it. Please do share some feedback. I'm going to introduce Carly now. So Carly's going to be speaking on how do you learn. So this is your second talk now, Carly. So I'm looking forward to this one. She's a senior software engineer at Morgan Stanley, passionate about agile, UX, and front-end web development, quite partial to a cup of tea, and considers it a big achievement to finish one while juggling work and chasing after her one-year-old son. Sounds very familiar. Whenever you're ready. Oh, Carly, I don't know. I can't hear you. Is it just me?
No, we
No, I
can't
can't
hear.
hear either.
You're unmuted. So I don't know if it's a microphone issue. You've got to love Zoom, haven't you?
Who's that?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Perfect. There we go.
You good?
Technical hitch to get us started.
All right, off you go.
Cool. So as technologists, learning is part of our jobs, but juggling it through both while working and also through life events and breaks can be particularly tough. So today I'm here to share a few tips that I've gleaned on my learning journey over the past year to help other people with how they can learn technology through work, through leave, through returning, and through other weird and wonderful situations. So before I get into the details of my learning journey, let me tell you a bit more about myself. My name is Carly. As Barry mentioned, I'm a senior software engineer at Morgan Stanley, specialising particularly in front-end web development. I am an avid, passionate technologist, particularly focused on agile UX and UI design. So you might see me posting some musings on the Twitter and Medium handles listed there. As Barry also mentioned, I am mum to the happy and energetic 1-year-old that you see in the picture there, and I love to learn. So we spend a very large portion of our time working. So Eurostat in 2019 published an estimation that we spend about 35.9 years of our lives working, which is quite a long time. And when you work in technology and you're having to regularly keep up to date with new learnings, that's a long time to be continually learning new things. So with continually learning new things and working hard, it's normal at certain points to want to take a break. Now, whenever we talk about breaks, we normally default to talking about parental leave or maternity leave, but we shouldn't forget that there's loads of other reasons that people take a gap, quite a few which are depicted in the slide here. And when you come back from a break that's longer than the usual 2 weeks holiday, where I normally come back and I've forgotten my password, it can be a difficult jump to get back into learning technology and to catch up with the things that you've missed. So with that in mind, how do we learn new tech continually through working, through breaks, life events, and everything in between? So based on my experiences, I have a few tips for you. The first of which is to set small, realistic goals. When I went out on leave in 2019, tech learning for me was really important and was something I wanted to keep going with. And with that in mind, I set myself 3 what I perceived to be realistic goals. I decided that I wanted to learn React, I wanted to write a book, and I wanted to get through a chunk of the massive reading list that I'd accrued over the past year. How many of those goals do you think I managed to achieve? Absolutely none. Big fat 0. So the book remains unwritten to this day. I managed to finish 1 fiction book, and I actually finished it on the train in my first week back into work. So looking back, I can see that the goals that I put forward were just far too big. So if you're juggling a particularly pressured work environment, or you're dealing with life events like I have been, it's important to try and set a small goal that you can then scale up rather than a large one that you then frantically try to tear down. And that means that you'll probably have a more enjoyable journey and it'll be far less stressful for you too. If we think back to learning how to study way back in high school or primary school or even college, if you were like me, your teachers tried to help you find your ideal format for consuming information. And when they covered it with me, they covered the VARC model that you can see here with the 4 key types of kind of learning. Now, I don't know about you, but I always defaulted to the same kind of style all the time because it was tried, it was tested, and it worked. But what you need to bear in mind is that format that always worked for you normally through college might not work now. So over the past year, as I've experienced working, going on maternity leave, transitioning back into work, and also trying to juggle childcare and lockdown, different formats have changed their accessibility to me. And I've rated them here from green, which was straightforward and really easy, to downright impossible red that just weren't happening. And while there's several insights I could share here, the most important one I'd like to talk about is podcasts for me. So when I was working, I didn't listen to podcasts at all. I tended to read books or blog posts on the train, and I was quite happy that was my dedicated time for me. But when I then moved into maternity leave, and even with lockdown after that, my commute disappeared. And so did my reading time as a result. So podcasts became very accessible because they were something I could do while multitasking and doing something else, such as chores around the house, or taking my son around the park, or dealing with the myriad of emails that I got to come back to when I returned to work. So for me, it was interesting that books and blogs that were really accessible before were now less accessible than podcasts, meaning I had to adapt my style. So it's worth considering. It might sound really strange to say in a talk about tech learning, but you need to know when to hit the pause button. Because if you keep going and trying to persevere through when things get tough, you're just going to make learning inaccessible and frustrating for yourself. So when I went on my portion of leave, and the same situation with my husband when he went on his portion of leave too, we both put learning tech to the back of our minds for the moment. Because at that time, it was more important trying to learn how to be a good parent. So that meant when we did come back to it later, we were engaged and interested and excited to find out about all the new things that had changed while we were taking a break. So I've shared several tips today, but the important thing I'd like you to take away from this is that it's about experimenting and trying things out, because we learn more from our failures than we do from our successes. We need to keep experimenting to make sure that as we continue to learn, that we can continue through these different scenarios and we can keep learning various different things and becoming better technologists and evolving as the tech evolves too. So next time you're thinking about how to juggle work, learning, life, and everything else in between, remember the 3 tips that worked for me. Consider, as part of your own learning journey, setting small, realistic goals, embracing different learning formats, particularly ones that maybe didn't work before that you'd like to try again, and know when to hit the pause button, because it's okay to take a break sometimes. So do reach out if you've got any other questions about my experiences on the learning journey I've been on the last year, and thank you very much for listening.
Brilliant. Thanks, Carly. Thanks for coming back. Does anyone have any questions out there? Oh, Dom's link's obviously on there, so please do fill in the form. We've had a couple back already for Chris, so appreciate any that you can send through. Does anyone have any questions for Carly there?
I would love to ask a question, actually.
Sure.
So I'm also a front-end developer for the first half of my career, and I feel like you know, learning is always a challenge, and there's that imposter syndrome where at some point you hit a wall and you're like, how do I learn this? And I've gone through different ways of learning as well. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you is sort of the human side of learning, where, you know, when you're frustrated, how do you bring yourself around to re-engage with the topic that you actually have to learn because it's your job or something? Like, how do you deal with the neurochemicals and the emotions of it all?
That's a really good question. So a couple of tips worked for me. I think the first thing is it's really easy when you're a front-end developer to think that you only have to learn about front-end and about the tech stack there. And I work with web specifically a lot of the time. So as you know, it changes all the time. It's ridiculous. It's really difficult. I think sometimes you just need to accept a bit that maybe you're not going to necessarily keep up to date with every single technology. And it's more important to focus on the principles of what's happening. So a good example is I've not covered every single framework under the sun like React, etc., but a lot of the kind of themes and ethoses around it, I've managed to kind of gather a bit from blog posts, and that if they're like 5 minutes or less, I managed to usually fit those in. So that was the first thing. The second thing was with the podcast, sometimes you need to focus on a different topic entirely, and that sounds a bit backwards, but sometimes it's just nice to listen to something else that's not about tech, and that means that you can come back to that again. And also other topics, you'd be surprised at how they relate together. So for example, one of the podcasts I listen to regularly is Super Freakonomics, and a lot of stuff around psychology comes out of those sometimes,
Right.
which, as I'm sure you're aware, relates quite heavily to front end too. And that was quite nice because it meant that I wasn't focusing on just the front end bit of it. It was a break, but it also made me feel a bit better that I was doing something that was related. So that's the two tips I would probably say. That's like my top
Great.
two.
Yeah, sounds great. Good answer. Thank you, Carly.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Carly. Appreciate that. And I can see the feedback coming in, so thank you. Really appreciate that too. So moving on, then we're going to have Dale Waterworth speaking on WebSockets using Java, Vert.x, and rxjs in Angular. So Dale is a product developer for A&D Digital in Manchester and is a keen rock climber. So Dale, when you're ready.
Hi everyone. My screen is coming through. So, yeah, thanks, Bryce. So, yeah, I'm Dale Waterworth, product developer for A&D Digital, and I did a little experiment in WebSockets using Java, Vert.x, and rxj Angular. So, Vert.x is like a toolkit for Java and other languages running on the JVM. It kind of helps you to build modern, complicated things like services, messaging systems, microservices. It kind of has a toolkit to kind of make that nice and easy for modern day development. And it uses this concept of a vertical, which you can deploy quite easily on networks and on your servers. And so the use case for this web service demo is to kind of get a HTML canvas, and when you draw on that, it will send events to the server, and that will broadcast that back to all people that are within this session. So the session's identified by a GUID, and so you'll draw on this and it'll come up on there. So you might have seen the kind of thing in Miro, Retrium, Figma, Planning Poker, where everyone's kind of centralized on one screen, all interacting at the same time. So I created 4 verticals, and they communicate with each other via an event bus. So usually you kind of might be using dependency injection to kind of create instances of repositories or services. So I wanted to do an experiment to use the event bus to communicate between those separating concerns, and to communicate with the web apps, we can use it via socket, and vice versa. When the web app communicates via the socket, it goes to the event bus and back to the verticals in question. So some code. So to get an instance of Vert.x, you simply create get an instance for the static caller. We can have configuration in a static file. Once we have that, we can call the deploy vertical, pass in the config, and to create a vertical, we simply extend abstract vertical, passing in the config, and then we override a start method where you do any logic in there. So we have 4 of these verticals to do different things of the system. So to create the actual WebSocket bridge itself, we use a sock.js handler class, and we can have some options there for our input and output fields. So for example, to output to the client, we have this key here followed by the GUID, and from the client we have the same thing, the client to server with the ID there. We create a route, so any typical REST endpoint have a route. It's that simple to create it in Vert.x. So when the front end calls event bus, I think it's an ID, it'll create the handshake there. And then this failure handler, so it says it can just logs an error on handle. So we create a server, and then we put in the router configuration there, listen on the port, and then catch any errors in this. So for the event bus, for the messaging, we have a consumer. So basically this enum is just a string. So anytime an event comes in to the event bus via the socket, it will check, well, if it's on this draw event, it will hit this function here. We can extract some of the data from the message object. And the event bus also has a request, so we can call this request new draw request. There'll be another consumer somewhere in the code, which will simply match that and return some data. And then in the response for this request, we can parse the data, return back here. And then the event bus publish will publish that to all the listeners in the client with this ID. So from what you saw earlier. So in the front end, we utilize the event bus class by vertex. So essentially, we just create an instance of that vertex. This path is the event bus endpoint that we saw earlier. And then when we have a connection, we'll set this in a behavior subject. And this is a rxjs thing that allows us to subscribe to that. And you can get the connection even after it's been subscribed to, because that's kind of the behavior of a behavior subject. And so the canvas is a typical HTML canvas, and I added some events for the mouse up, mouse down, and the touch events for mobile device. I think there may be a link in the chat which will shed more light on how this works. And so sending an event to the server, it's just as easy. We get the instance of the event bus, subscribe, get the event bus connection, and send it to this path of link with the GUID. And hopefully the demo gods are with me today. So if anyone's clicked on a link, oh, I don't think it's worked. Okay, so what should have happened, if people drawn here, you can see this happen in real time. So if I do a squiggle for like 3 seconds, you can already see that that's created 251 events. So that has also, basically that sent the event to the server 251 times. And on your screen, you probably should see that. So all the events I'm sending, all these 300 events should have gone to your screen as well. So it's quite fast, quite quick. We could send these events over a typical REST call, but I think the socket kind of calls give them more speed and kind of quicker, less, what's the word for it? Less latency, as it's done with sockets. So that's my talk today. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer my experiment with using WebSockets on Vertex and Angular.
Thanks, Dale. That's great. Does anyone have any questions for Dale?
Yeah, I do. Dale, this is so. How do I put this? So, what's your feeling? Are you going to do you feel this has got potential and you want to use it Vertex and other places, or are you going to run away screaming?
I did really enjoy it. I was on a client and using it for around 6 months, and it was really good. It was a bit of a learning curve to get used to the Rx kind of Java techniques, and I really enjoyed it. I'd try recommend it for future clients, but the kind of take on it is most places are highly involved with Spring, and I think there's new paradigms in that I forget the names of, but yeah, I would love to take it forward and kind of really get into the Rx side of things.
Cool. I mean, because Vertex is quite popular, so you wouldn't be the only one. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Dale. Appreciate that. Again, the feedback form. Thank you. I've seen there's much more feedback coming in than usually does, so that's good. So please keep it coming for Dale as well. And we have Alex McLintock for the final talk of today. And so Alex's talk is on data science should be treated as part of the business, not part of IT. So Alex is a professional software developer and has been since '92, a big data solution and technical architect focusing on Apache Hadoop and the ecosystem which grew from it. So Alex, when you're ready.
Am I muted now? Can you hear me? Okay, sorry about that. My mute button disappeared. I was like, I wasn't expecting that. And also I should check that you can see my screen. Great, okay. I'm trying something slightly different. My talk is only 5 minutes and I only have 2 slides, plus a title and finish. So I'm Alex McLintock. I used to be a C++ and Java coder, and I've been a member of the London Java community for some years, but I moved into the world of architecture and in particular enterprise big data. And so when a company desires a new big data, a new data science capability, they often come to me for their big data infrastructure. I try to explain to business people how data science fits into that picture and how it complements the data analytics and data engineering world. Now, one of the big mistakes that businesses make is that they treat their data scientists just like another part of IT. And that's understandable. But they should be treating it as a first-class business function. In reality, data scientists have to understand the business and all the data in that business. And finally, data scientists need to get useful, actionable insights and communicate those to the rest of the business. And the best analogy I've come up with is that a business should think about their data science capability as kind of like a superpower, a spidey sense superpower that gives them the ability to detect problems and change the business direction quickly. But it's quite understandable that data scientists look like they're in IT because they're techies who can program. They quite often use Python and R, often with Spark for their big data use. And because of Spark, Java and Scala is also used. They like to use with databases. Data scientists deal with structured and unstructured data. They are comfortable with CSVs and Parquet files and God knows what else. And of course, data scientists also like to do a lot of maths. They are just about the only people I know who have good use for NVIDIA GPUs. Did you know that GPUs didn't stand for gaming processing units? No, okay, and Bitcoin miners, those are the other people who use GPUs a lot. But in reality, data scientists need to be part of the business. And so let's go to my first slide. Let's see if we can move on to that. Hooray. Okay, so this is a typical traditional way of describing the data science lifecycle. And I don't know how well you can read it, but I'll go round it in turn. It starts off with a hypothesis. So some kind of business question that the business will actually get some benefit from. And I've drawn it as kind of being supplied to the data scientist, but in reality, there'll be like a conversation going on about what's possible, what might be possible. And so this hypothesis generation is a bit of a team effort there. And the sort of hypothesis you might think of as, is it possible to predict when one of my factory machines is about to fail based upon the measuring sensors that I've got at the moment? Can you identify that? Because it will save me lots of money if I could predict that in advance. So I don't know. So the next stage that happens here is gathering data. So the data scientist needs to fetch the relevant data for this problem. And obviously that requires IT techniques, but in reality, it also requires knowing the business in great detail. Some of the data may never have been used before by the company, and some of the data may be totally new. It may be outside the company. The next stage, cleaning data. Now, obviously, cleaning data requires programming. I'm assuming that it's not all done in Excel, but some people do it all in Excel. And you need that programming skills to reject invalid values and format them so that they're consistent. Some different data sets may be different scales. Although it looks like an IT function, of course, you have to understand that business knowledge to know what's valid and what's not. It's often said that this cleaning data process is the largest part of a data scientist's job. I think a lot of them don't like that. Next, we come to exploring data. typically that involves finding correlations and learning what can be thrown away and ignored. And the important thing to realize here is, of course, is that you don't know what you're going to discover when you explore the data. In some ways, this is similar to what traditional BI, business information people do when they are doing their analytics as well. But the unique task about data scientists is that they're model building and testing capabilities, where they're taking the data and actually seeing whether it proves the hypothesis or not. And one of the things that's popular at the moment is the introduction of auto ML, auto machine learning. Now, I am suspicious of this technology because although in theory it lets lots and lots of models be built and tested almost with no supervision, in reality you need the business expertise of a data scientist to understand what's actually relevant and useful. Finally, in the life cycle, the data scientist has to interpret and communicate those results to the rest of the business. Without that, they're just, well, they're not really doing anything. So I think I'm going to wrap up soon. So is data science an IT function? Let's look at what they do. They create insight into important business decisions. They communicate that insight to the rest of the business. They enable businesses to make informed decisions and respond to changing scenarios, and sometimes enable that business to survive. Finally, what does that provide? I think it provides a capability which I want to call my Spidey superpower, because frankly, it's one of the most important things a business can cope with. That sounds bad, but without it, a business might get squashed. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Alex. Really appreciate that.
6 minutes to 5. Oh well.
How long was it in the end? I didn't time. How long was it?
I timed 6 minutes, but
6.
We won't mention anything else. So hopefully people are okay with that.
Absolutely. Do you know, it's so different when you speak. I remember I did one before and I thought it would be about 4 minutes, and it was closer to 8. The problem is I just can't stop talking, I think, for me.
Yeah, it's been under 5 minutes every time that I've said it up till now, and then I start waffling.
For some reason, an audience does have that impact, doesn't it?
Yep.
Does anyone have any questions for Alex on data science?
I would love to ask a question. I'm a new speaker as well, Alex, and I did a talk in the 20-minute slots after the lightning talk on AI built by the people for the people, with a focus on cognitive diversity and making sure we have diverse teams building so that the data we feed the algorithms for AI. And a point that you mentioned about auto machine learning is something that triggered my thoughts on how we're ensuring that our machine learning isn't biased, you know, in the way that the world can be biased about different human characteristics.
That's a very interesting that you bring up that point. This talk was based upon a blog that I did a few days ago and published yesterday. So I had most of the words already written. And one of the things that a colleague of mine criticized was that I had not mentioned ethics at all. And basically the reason being is that it's just too large a subject. I feel like I could do that 20-minute talk on ethics by itself.
I would love to see that talk.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, I hear people talk such rubbish, you know, saying that machine learning can never be racist or can never be biased. And of course, that's rubbish, because it's built into the data that can be supplied to machine learning algorithms. So
exactly.
if say, for example, you set up a machine learning system to copy some loan decisions, and those loan decisions are prejudiced against people who live in certain areas, then the machine learning algorithm may copy that prejudice even if they don't see the person, then it may very well be biased. And it's one of those things that you as hopefully as a good data scientist, data engineer, you are always aware of and challenging yourself. Just like, is it secure? You know, am I revealing people's personal information? You know, these are the checks that you should be doing all the time, on top of the, am I coding this correctly?
And I think a main point for me that is going to be a focus of mine moving forward is actually having diversity on the team. Because as much as I would like to be thinking about the needs of others, if I'm not living their life, then I don't see the world through that lens, and it's hard for me to know about something I don't know about. So I think championing actually getting people into teams who have diverse views is a good.
I'm going to agree with you and say it's hard in some places, because I've largely worked in the city where we're largely white men, and it's very difficult to get much of a change there. But there's an awful lot of people who are observing the need for data scientists, and they're seeing that there's a lot of people who, such as women, ethnic minorities, who are doing the science. They are academics. They have the skills, and they're just being so I say, oh, have you considered data science as a career? And so hopefully we're going to be building more diverse teams. Perhaps another talk, bro. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. This one could go.
Thank you, Alex.
It's such a hot topic, I think, at the moment. Diversity. We had a presentation yesterday that was around leadership for heads of people community, and around bringing out the top performers within any organization, and trying to bottle up what it is that they do, and disseminate that across the others. And that, again, that we had a few comments from that around how this touches diversity. And I think it's really interesting with all these different subjects. They seem to be diversity because of obviously the things that have happened this year, and how many people have been educated. I think as a result, it's now in every talk, every topic. It's getting everywhere. So I think we're definitely going to see a lot of positive steps and positive movement. Hopefully, we've certainly got some initiatives going on within our communities as of this year that we're really trying to push forward. So yeah, hopefully the world's going to be a better place. Here's hoping. Okay, thank you very much, Alex. Thank you, Chris, Carly, and Dale. Really appreciate the talks then.